Hi, my name's Kim. I'm an introvert who travels the world whilst being on a tight budget, and today we're going to be talking about culture shock. What is culture shock and how can it affect you? If you're a first time traveller, it's more likely to affect you. It's basically when you haven't been to a different country with a different culture before, you're more likely to be impacted by it more severely. But don't let this stop you from travelling. I've even had something that's kind of called backwards culture shock. It's basically when you're in a different culture for so long, when you come back home again, it's kind of like a culture shock coming home because you've been away from home for so long and the cultures are so different. Today I'm going to be talking you through what culture shock is, how it can affect you, and what you can do to kind of make the symptoms less. So let's get into it. What is culture shock and why does it happen? Basically, culture shock is that feeling you get when you're away from home in a culture that's vastly different to yours. A lot of people who are backpacking, exchange students, expatriates, so people who have emigrated, get this quite a bit. But even if you're just going on holiday for a short amount of time, it doesn't mean that you won't get culture shock. It's basically sort of a shock, a realization, or like a surprise of being in a new place with a new culture that may have different food, different language, different way of living. You may also get separation anxiety, and this may occur because you don't have your normal support network as easily available. This could be because of phone signal, it could be time difference, it could be anything, but that kind of ties in with culture shock too. The side effects of culture shock. So when you travel to a new culture, you may have that sort of feeling of being really overwhelmed by the difference in what you're used to. Some people's culture shock doesn't go much further than that, just that feeling of feeling overwhelmed, but some people do have other side effects from it. This can include low mood, headaches or stomach aches, rapid mood swings, anxiety, withdrawal and inability to focus. Examples of culture shock. So culture shock can happen from going to countries that have a similar way of living to yours, which is a little bit different, or vastly different cultures. Here are a few examples of when I have experienced culture shock. So when I was younger, I went to Mexico, and when you come through the airport, when you've gone through passport control, a lot of you may have experienced this if you've gone through Mexico, but you've got to press a button, and if it shows green you can go through, and if it shows red you can't, and you kind of have like extra security. They check you a little bit more further. In normal airports, what happens is you go through customs, you collect your bags, you walk through the nothing to declare, and then you end up in like the wilds of the arrivals gate. It's not quite the same in Mexico. You press the button, you're allowed to go through. The walk towards the arrivals gate is mayhem. Normally, at least in Britain, you have like a duty-free shop there. That's not duty-free shop. It's full of people trying to sell you timeshares, and there is absolutely pandemonium. When I went there, when I was about 14, I got kind of trapped in a corner by a porter who was trying to take somebody else's luggage. I eventually managed to get myself out of the corner and rejoin my family. We walked through this corridor with all of these timeshares people, and there is as if they were like on top of you going, buy this, buy that, buy that, buy that, and there is so overwhelming. You've just come in on a flight, and then all of a sudden you've just got like people on you, and they're talking to you in English, talking to you in Spanish, trying to get you to buy things. They're like, come here, you have a look at this, you have a look at this, and it is so overwhelming, and it's not something that I had ever experienced before. So that's sort of the biggest culture shock that I've had when I've been traveling. But I've also had backwards culture shock. So if you remember me explaining earlier, it's basically when you're being at a place for a long time and then you come back home and home feels weird. So this happened when I go to Canada quite a lot when I was younger. So the Canadian culture didn't feel different to me. So whenever I went over to Canada, it felt like sort of an extension from home. I'd always gone for maybe 6 weeks over the summer. One time when I was 19, I went for 5 months. But when I was in the second year of my university degree, I went over to Canada for 3.5 months, and this is when I got this sort of backwards culture shock. So when you're in Canada, when you're in the supermarket, everybody's really chatty and they talk to each other, and it's not really something that happens in Britain. If you go to the supermarket, everybody's like in their own bubble. You don't really talk to people beyond yourself or the group that you're with. But in Canada, everybody talks to each other. So if you're stuck in a line waiting to pay, you all have a chat. As an introvert who's from Britain, it's a very sort of foreign concept to me. Because I'd been to Canada quite a lot, I was kind of sort of used to it. When I went for that 3.5 months, I really got into the swing of like sort of vibing with people and getting when you can talk to people and having conversations with strangers, and it was actually really nice. But we flew back into London Heathrow. We caught a bus from London Heathrow to London Victoria, and I was used to going around smiling, saying hello to everybody, because that's what it's like in Canada, and I completely forgot that I was back in Britain and nobody talks to anybody, and it's basically everybody shut off. But that's when I had backwards culture shock. I forgot that everybody in Britain's introverted, maybe. Or maybe we're just rude. Language. So traveling to countries with different languages can sometimes be disorientating, but what can be even more so is if you go to a country who doesn't use the Latin writing system. So basically, you know, the ABC system that we see, that's in a lot of countries' languages such as French, Spanish, English use it, Welsh does, you know, the sort of normal alphabet that we see. Some countries don't have that alphabet, so you can end up walking around the country not just not understanding the language that's on the signs because it's in like, you know, French, but we understand or recognize the symbols of the words. But you could end up in a country where the whole like writing system is completely different, and that can be so disorientating. Because for me, at least with French and Spanish, you can kind of ish guess what it's alluding to, but in Arabic or Greek, I can't even guess what the word is meant to be because it is so different. Not being able to understand any of the signage anywhere, I can see it being really disorientating and would be a big culture shock. Climate. So I live in the UK and we have what's called a temperate climate. So we have cool, wet winters and warm, wet summers. It rains basically year round, and it doesn't really get hot, it doesn't really get overly cold. But when we go to countries that have really hot temperatures, like Australian summers, 40 degrees Celsius, Canadian winters, -10 degrees Celsius, that feeling of being so hot or so cold can come as a sort of a shock to the system. Have you ever walked off a plane in a hot country and you feel that sort of blast of warm air hit you as you leave the plane? Do you know what? There's nothing better than it. But for some people that can cause culture shock because it's such a vastly different temperature difference than what we are used to, or what you are used to from the country that you're going from to. Food. There are many different cuisines from around the world, but with the spread of international foods being available in a lot of places now, odds are that the food to the destination that you're traveling to, you've probably tried already. For example, there are a lot of Chinese, Indian, Greek restaurants around here, so if I travel to India, I've already sampled part of the Indian cuisine. But it's different when you travel to a place and all you have to eat for that week or fortnight or however long you're there is that cuisine. Some countries are known for having spicy food as part of their cuisine, such as Mexico, India. If you're not used to eating foods like that, then that could be a shock to your like bodily system, so you could end up getting diarrhea, things like that. So if you're going to go to a country where you think that their food is a lot different to what you're used to, then it may be worth taking diarrhea tablets or stuff like that with you, just so you're prepared, just in case. Some countries also, the water that comes out of the tap isn't suitable for drinking, or it is suitable for drinking for the people who live there because they're used to how the water is, Maybe it's a little bit more stilty, or maybe there's, I don't know, more things in it that we're not used to drinking. But they are, so their body's kind of used to it. But you may end up going to a country where you can't drink the water that comes out of the tap because it'll make you sick. So another thing to be aware of, just do your research before you go somewhere, and just drink bottled water if you're worried. Body language and slang. Everywhere you travel to has its own sort of mannerisms and slang words that you'll come across. So for example, there are words that we use in Wales that if we went into England, potentially people wouldn't understand what we're talking about. I'll give you an example. Cwtch in Wales means a hug. But if I went anywhere else around the world, people wouldn't necessarily know what a cwtch is. But if you say to almost anybody in the street in Wales, they know that it means a hug. Also, there's sort of little mannerisms that you do that could end up accidentally being perceived as rude. So it's always worth doing your research before you go somewhere to make sure that what you're doing doesn't accidentally come across as rude, and what people are doing to you or slang words they're using, you know what they mean, so you don't come across as accidentally rude. That can end up being a sort of a culture shock again, because you're going to somewhere where potentially thumbs up here means yeah, great, brilliant, but you go to another country and thumbs up means like something rude, which I'm not going to say on this channel. But it could be all sorts of things like that. So it's worth doing research about cultures before you go to a culture. You can find out information about cultures in a very sort of a brief sense of it on the FCO website. So I'll put the link to that down in the description. The FCO website is actually a really good resource for loads of things to research when you're traveling. From things like security, safety, the weather, and plus cultures, and local laws too. So it's a really good read, and I just read it because I find it fun. But yeah, check out the FCO website before you travel somewhere. How to ease culture shock. So there's a few things that you can do when you get to your new destination to make the shock of being in another culture not so harsh. So these can be things such as staying in somewhere that's self-catering, so you can cook food from your own home country, keeping in touch with family and friends, doing research about the country that you're traveling to before you get there so you have in mind what to expect, giving yourself time to adjust to the new culture, and don't beat yourself up if you are struggling with it, and go out and talk to the locals. The more you learn about how locals live, the easier you may find it to adjust to your new culture. How culture shock is good for you. I've basically been talking about almost all the negative sides of culture shock throughout this video, how it can make you disorientated and how, you know, you can have a rough time going to new cultures because they're vastly different, but they can also be really, really amazing too. Think of going to a new culture and all the amazing new things you're going to learn by sticking to countries that have similar cultures to you. You're not sort of broadening your horizons and learning new things, but the more places you travel to, more different cultures, the more things you're going to learn about more people and more cultures around the world, which will make you more tolerant of meeting new people and more able to connect with people because you understand their cultures and why they do things a lot more. It basically gives you a better understanding of the world and how the world works, and the fact that the whole world isn't just the country you live in. There are billions of people around the world who live completely different lives to you, and it's all really fascinating. As scary as all this may sound, all the things that I'm describing, it doesn't happen every single time you go to a new culture. For me, like I've described a few times that it's happened to me, but I can't think of many other times it's actually happened. So it's not like you go to a new culture and automatically you're going to end up with culture shock. Sometimes you go to a new culture, it's vastly different, and you kind of get this vibe from it immediately, and you're like, do you know what? Yeah, I like it. This is exactly how I felt when I went to Italy, when I went to Venice. The culture is different from Britain, quite a lot different, and the architecture is different, but I went there and I'm like, do you know what? This is my vibe. And even though it is so different to the UK or anything I've ever experienced before, I really enjoyed my time there, and I thought it was such an amazing experience. So this can be what happens to you too. You can go to a place that is so completely different, so completely out of any comfort zone that you've ever been in, and it can be the most amazing experience of your life. So be aware that you can go places and have like culture shocks, or you can go places and just like completely love a place. And even if you go to a place and do have culture shock, it doesn't mean that you don't like the place. It just means that you're having a bit of time to struggling to adjust, and that's fine too. It's fine. Have you ever been somewhere and you've had like a massive culture shock, or have you ever had backwards culture shock? So you've been somewhere for such a long time, you've come home and you're like, what is this country that I live in? Let me know in the comments down below. Every Wednesday I release short form travel videos on IGTV, so go check me out on Instagram at awkwardlykimtravel. Every Monday and Friday normally I live stream at 6 PM. This week is going to be Wednesday though, a little bit different. And every Monday and Friday at 7 PM I release a new video. So don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you are notified whenever I bring out a new video or live stream. If you want to watch a video about travel misconceptions, I'll put that up here. And if you want to watch one about the frequently asked questions of travel and me answering them, I'll put that video down here. But I hope you enjoy. I'll see you again. Enjoy your life. Ta-da! And by the way, I'll see you Wednesday for the live stream. Bye!